Welcome to Module 3 on process mapping. This is where AI magically gets smarter without changing a single model setting. Now, why is that? It's because most AI failures in finance are not AI problems, they're process problems. If you've ever said, the AI doesn't get how we do this, or it missed an obvious exception, or it doesn't understand our rules, I have some bad news and some good news. The bad news is the agent isn't wrong. The good news is once you map the process properly, the agent suddenly looks brilliant. This module is about taking what lives in your head and in 10 years of tribal finance lore and turning it into instructions a robot can actually follow. So, how do agents see processes? Well, humans are amazing at filling in gaps, agents are not. You know what that weird FX thing we always adjust for means? Your agent absolutely does not. An agent doesn't see a process. It sees a sequence of instructions. If you don't explicitly define the rules, the agent will guess. And guessing in finance has ended a lot of careers. So you have to understand human versus agent thinking. Here's the key mindset shift. You're no longer explaining this to a smart colleague. You're explaining it to a brilliant robot who has zero context and absolutely no common sense. Here's a good analogy. Design your agent like you're onboarding a new analyst who is extremely fast, never tired, but has never worked in finance before. So for process mapping, forget swim lanes, forget BPMN diagrams, forget PowerPoint masterpieces no one ever updates. This is the only process map an agent cares about. The starting point with a trigger, adding data, making decisions with rules, and generating an output. So let's begin with starting and triggering. Every agent needs to know when to start. Triggers can be things like a scheduled time, a file arriving in your inbox, a manual request, or even a close milestone. If you don't define the trigger, the agent doesn't know when it's supposed to wake up. So now that it's triggered, let's talk about our data sources. Agents don't magically know where your data lives. You must explicitly tell them which file, which tab in the file, which policy documents. If humans have to hunt for it, so will the agent, and it will hunt badly. Data sources can include anything from ERP exports, to bank files, to Excels or Google Sheets, to policies and your standard operating procedures. It can even include things like emails or PDFs, depending on where you want to connect it. Once your data and information's in, then we need to think about decisions and rules. And this is where most automations fail. Humans think rules are obvious, but agents need them written like legal contracts. If a variance is greater than X, explain it. If cash is less than Y, flag it. If a policy isn't found, stop and ask a human. If data's missing, just stop the process. Rules must be explicit, boring, and unambiguous. They can include things like thresholds, conditions, different required actions you need from the agent. Most critically, fallback behavior when things don't go as planned. That leads into the fourth part, which is exceptions and edge cases. Agents don't typically fail on normal days. They fail on weird days and weird data. So we design for what can go wrong. We design for missing data. We design for unexpected zero balances. We design for unusually large movements. We also design for conflicting inputs. These are things that a human could handle that an agent will struggle with. If you've ever said, oh yeah, this works except for that one case, well, that's an exception that you need to document to help the agent out. Finally, what comes out of your agent? Agents need to know what format you're looking for, how detailed you want the output to be, where the output needs to go, how it needs to be treated. A Slack message is different from a deck-ready paragraph. You need to tell the agent exactly what done looks like to you. Outputs can include things like commentary, tables, files, PDFs, alerts, really anything that you need it to be. You should also help your agent understand the destination. Is it going to your email? Is it going to Teams or Slack? Does it need to feed back to your Excel or your Drive? Does it need to end up in a deck or Microsoft Word? Because that's going to change how it behaves. Now it's your turn. We're going to map your capstone process, the one you selected in Module 2. Don't overthink it. One page, boxes and arrows, plain language. Let me show you a concrete example before you start mapping your own process. So let's go ahead and build a process map. Now, I'm going to show you how to build a process map for the demo agent that I'm going to teach you how to build. But once we're done with this, I want you to do the same thing. Sit down and write out your process map. Now, I'm going to be doing this in an online tool just because this is the tool that I'm comfortable and familiar with. You can do this on anything. You can do this on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. You can do this in Word. You can do this in PowerPoint. You can do this in Excel. Wherever you're comfortable with, don't go and spend money. I process map a lot, so I've got this tool. This also just honestly looks better on camera, so I can make sure that you can really follow along with what I'm doing. But again, I personally do a lot of process maps on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. I do a lot on this tool. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what tool you use. Keep it simple. Use what's easy, available, and what you're comfortable with. What matters is just that you're getting the process flow down. So let's go through the process flow we learned. So again, I'm going to build a process map over here in this tool called Miro. So if you'll recall, we've got 4 steps in our process map. So step 1, we're going to identify the starting point or the trigger. Step 2, we're going to identify the data and inputs we may need along the way. Step 3, we're going to identify the decisions and rules. And step 4, we're going to define the output. So we want to think about our process in that frame. So let's go ahead and pop those in here. So this will be our first one. So this will be step 1, start and trigger. Okay, now let's do our step 2. We'll pop this. So let's go ahead with step 2 over here. This is going to be our data and inputs. All right, we'll copy that again. This will be our step 3 over here. This is going to be our decisions and rules. All right, and then step 4 over here, this is going to be where we define the outputs. So this is the process map, and it's really important we get this right simply, but it's important we get this right because this is going to feed into a lot of the other prep work we're going to do before we start building the agent. All of our different agent requirements, our blueprints, our system prompts, we're going to learn all about those in the next module. It all comes back to how we do this. So we're going to, again, define the outputs. And those are the 4 steps we want to build. And I do have it up here that we're going to build a monthly variance commentary agent, but let me just type it down here for your reference as well. So I want to build an agent that can look at our budget versus actuals and write our first pass of monthly commentary, both by looking at prior reports that might have this information and also just looking at new financials that are coming in. So what starts this? What's our trigger? Well, this can be a couple of different things. It could be when we get an email from accounting that month-end close is completed. It could be when we get an email or when we find out that the actuals file is available. It can be when our Power BI dashboard updates. Whatever it means for you, when you can start writing commentary, that's going to be the trigger. So that's the start of this process. And keep in mind, we want to map the process as it is today. We may make some tweaks to make it more efficient for the agent, but it's about getting the building blocks of the process. It's not about getting the small details the way you do it, because we're going to have the agent do the work. It's about getting the flow. That's why I really want you to focus on these 4 steps. So let's go ahead and put our first process in here. All right, so I'm going to drag my step 1 process over here. All right, so our trigger here is going to be when month end close is completed and we get an actuals file from accounting. So when our actuals file is available, we've already got the budget, we're FP&A, and we can start doing the budget versus actuals analysis. So that's step 1. Now let's look at step 2, data and inputs. We'll put our next box over here. So this is going to be our data and inputs, and also just I personally like to draw the little lines so we can connect that and say, hey, this is our process flow. Look at that. Okay, so what are our data and inputs going to be? So our inputs can be things like our actuals by account. We can have our budget by account. The prior month reports. And our mapping of accounts to management reporting. You may not have this last one. Not everybody needs to map the account. Sometimes it's set up how you want it, but a lot of times the way that the ledger looks isn't exactly how we want to show it in our report. So if we need that information, any kind of mapping tables, right? You want to think about your data and inputs. You've got the data, your fact tables, which has all the hard information, and then the mapping tables that help explain and expand out that information. And we want to make sure we have both those sets. So those are our data and inputs. We'll put our next box in here. This is going to be for our decisions and our rules. All right, we'll pop that over here. We'll draw our line. Pop that in here. We'll draw our line. All right, so now we've got our flow continuing. And clear this out since I copied it. All right, so decisions and rules. So this can be things like we need to make sure the variance is material. We don't want to explain everything. We maybe just want to explain depending on the size of your business. So is the variance material? We don't want to explain every single variance. We don't want the AI tool going and explaining $5. This can change depending on the size of your company. Some really big companies, the threshold's, $500,000. For you, it could be 5,000, 10,000, whatever it is. You just want to make sure you're telling the agent you're not going to explain everything. We want to be very clear. Is it favorable or unfavorable? It's very important if it's favorable or unfavorable. And we also want to tell the agent, is this recurring or one time? So this is where it's going to look back across the prior reports we've given it to see if this keeps happening, if it's a trend or if it's something new. So is this a recurring or a one time? So those are some decisions and some rules we're going to want to code in. And those are things that we kind of just do in the process that we would need to explicitly tell the agent. You have to remember these decisions and rules. These are things where the human is normally making judgments. You have to give that judgment to the AI agent because otherwise it's just going to decide, and it may not decide the way that your team, yourself, your company would decide. All right, and then we'll do our last one here. This is going to be to define the outputs. So what am I looking for it to come back with? Go ahead and clear this out. We'll draw a little line over. So there's our process flow. So our outputs, we want to have bullet point commentary. This isn't probably going to be the final commentary. As I've said before, 80% of the work is going to be done by the AI tool. The last 20%, the polish, is going to be done by us. So we're going to get bullet point commentary we can work with. We probably want to have a summary with the top 3 drivers, just kind of tell us what we need to be focused on. And we want to have clear, concise, executive-ready language. Again, we're still going to polish it, but we want to get it as far as possible. And that's the process. Now, there may be other steps that you do along the way. There may be things that there may be little tweaks you do to the data, other things like that, but we're going to let the AI agent and our building process handle some of those nuances. These are the building blocks of the process, starting in the triggers, the data and the inputs, the decisions and the rules, and the defining outputs. And you can put more content down here. You don't have to put 1 or 2 lines. If there's several things you want in here, go ahead and give it that additional context, that additional information. But what's important is to not overcomplicate it. We want to give good bounds to the AI agent. We want to really clearly frame up the process, but we don't need to document every single detail because that's where the AI agent's power is going to step in to do the work for us. And here's the really cool thing. This process map, this is 70% of the work to get an AI agent built. The rest of it is just telling the AI agent to do these things. Sure, there's going to be some buttons we're going to have to click. There's going to be some testing. There's going to be guardrails. But this framework, understanding your process and being able to put it in this framework that you can teach to an agent, honestly, that's the really hard part. So with the process map done, we are ready to move on and start building the documents and the blueprints that are going to guide us through the development of our agent. So now that we've got our process maps done, let's turn these into agent requirements. And you won't have to do this alone because I'm going to show you how to use AI to do this. So what is an agent requirement? Well, it's really taking your process map and turning it into a prompt structure, knowledge documents, and the tools required. Once your process is mapped, building the agent becomes mechanical. You're not guessing anymore, you're translating. We start with the prompt structure. Your system prompt comes directly from your process map. It has your role, it has your inputs, it has your rules, it has your exceptions, and it has your outputs. If it's in the map, it goes in the prompt. Second are your knowledge documents. Any policies, SOPs, or checklists referenced in the process needs to become knowledge for the agent. No more remember how we do this, now it's documented and searchable. And finally, tools. Does the agent need to be able to read Excel files? Does it need to be able to summarize files? Does it need to be able to work with CSVs? How about generating tables? And where do the outputs need to be sent? Do they need to be connected to other tools like Google Drive? This defines the tools you'll connect in the next module when we start building the agent. With all this information in place, you can generate your agent requirements document. You can even use AI to pull this off. Your agent requirement document should include the purpose, the inputs, the rules, the outputs, the knowledge, and all of the tools you need. Now it's time to build the agent requirements document. Now that may sound like something really complicated that your tech or your financial systems team would normally do, but I'm going to show you how to do it using AI. You're going to build something that a consulting firm could charge you $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 for in a couple of minutes using the AI prompt framework that I'm going to give you. It's going to be very easy, and I'm going to walk you through how to use the AI, and AI is going to walk you through the rest of it step by step. So what is an agent requirements document? Well, again, this is something, if you've worked on financial systems before, this is something you work with on your financial systems team or your tech team. If you need to build a new system, if you need to add enhancements, this is going to tell the AI who it is and what its job is, what we need it to accomplish. This is the most important part of the entire build because it's going to translate our process map into terms and into functionality that our AI agent can act on. So the first thing we want to do to get started is we want to take our process map and we want to give it into a format that the AI tool can read. So because I did my process map on the computer, I'm going to very simply go to my snipping tool. You could do this if you did it on paper, just scan it in. If it's an Excel file, save it. Just put it into a format that you can attach to your AI tool, whatever your AI tool is going to be, and we'll talk about that in a second. So I'm going to create this. Here's my image. I'm just going to save this down. All right, and I'll just save it as a screenshot. That is totally fine. So we've got that ready. Now I'm going to go over to ChatGPT. Now I'm using ChatGPT just because this is what I've got trained and where I do most of my work. It doesn't matter what tool you use. The prompt framework I'm going to give you, the work we need to do, you're going to do just as well if you use Claude, if you use Copilot, if you use Gemini, if you use ChatGPT, whatever you have access to, whatever your work allows you to use. Always make sure you're thinking about security and compliance. If you're working in a corporate setting, you're most likely to have access to something like Copilot. It doesn't matter. They're all going to work great. Now for all the demos in this tutorial, you're going to see me using ChatGPT and you're going to see me using ChatGPT with a pro subscription. But I'm not going to do anything that requires a pro subscription. Everything you see me do, you can do on a totally free ChatGPT subscription, on a totally free Claude subscription. I just have pro because I use it all the time. The only real limit is that you will be limited in the number of prompts you can do in a day. That's somewhere between usually like 30 to 40. It's kind of based on the number of tokens. Remember, we learned about that in module 1, but you're going to be able to do everything you see here totally free. If you've got Pro, great. If you've got a Copilot to work, great, but you don't need it. Everything we're doing is really just the basics. That's how powerful these AI tools are. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to go get that screenshot we did. Let's go ahead and add that. Okay, so there's the screenshot, and the AI tool is going to be able to use optical character recognition to read everything in there. And then we're going to post the prompt in. And it's always important that we structure our prompt. So here's the prompt we're going to use. Act as a skilled financial analyst. Just like we're going to tell the AI agent who we want it to be, we need to tell the chat who we want it to be. Use the process map I provided via attachment to create a requirements document for an AI agent. This document should spell out the purpose, the inputs, the rules, the outputs, the knowledge, and the tools. This last line is what I think is most important to get good responses out of these generative AI chatbots. And that's ask me any questions you need to give the best possible output. Just like we've been talking about for the agent, that we need to kind of give it guardrails and kind of define its scope, we need to tell the chatbot not to guess and to ask us if it has questions. So with that, we'll go ahead and send this away and we'll see what we get back. All right, so it's already read the image. It's saying, let's turn this process map into something someone could actually build. All right, and here is the AI agent requirements document. It just jumped right into it. The purpose of this agent is to automatically generate clear, executive-ready monthly variance commentary. This is going to replace manual, repetitive writing with a consistent, structured, and auditable process. And here's all of the goals. In short, and this is great, turn raw numbers into decision-ready narrative. That's a line we'll remember later when we have to explain this to our executives. Inputs, it's going to need financial data, actuals, budget, it's going to need metadata and structure, and it's going to need contextual inputs, optional but powerful. So these are things we can ask the user to feed in if it has information it wants it to know. All right, decision logic. This is the brain of the agent. We're talking about variance evaluation, categorization logic, prioritization rules, consistency and tone rules. And these are all of the different things we're going to need to train the agent on to make sure it can handle the task. And then what are the outputs? So the primary output is going to be executive commentary and a concise board-ready summary. Here's an example format. Operating expenses were $1.2 million unfavorable to plan, driven primarily by higher than expected cloud infrastructure costs and delayed hiring savings. These were partially offset by lower professional services spend following project completion in Q2. Boy, does that sound like almost every variance I've ever read, so it nailed it. Some secondary outputs, if we want things by comment, if we want it annotated, some different options we could have there. The knowledge requirements. It must understand financial statement structure, how finance teams interpret variances. So there's some information and knowledge we need to make sure we give it as we build it, as well as some optional enhancements. I love giving it historical commentary to learn tone and phrasing. That's a great suggestion. 6, tools and integrations. We've got our data sources, processing and logic. We need to make sure it can analyze data, use Python, things like that. AI layer will need a large language model for narrative generation, and then the ability to deliver it, whether that's through Excel, PowerPoint, emails, BIs, whatever you have you. And then success criteria. It's successful if it cuts prep time by 70 to 90%. That nails it. My goal is always 80%. The last 20% should still be done by a human. The output requires minimal editing. It sounds like a seasoned pro wrote it, and it can be used month over month with minimal manual input. So just nailed it. It didn't even have to ask us any questions. It just dove right in, got the purpose, and there's really almost nothing I would change about this. So now take the process map you built for your capstone project, use the prompt that I'm going to give you right here, pop the prompt in with your process map, answer any questions if needed. Once you have your agent's requirement document, let's go ahead and we're going to pop this into a Word document because we're going to need this later. So once you've got your agent requirements, go ahead and copy this because we're going to need to put this into a Word document and we're going to need to use this later for some of our other AI prompting. So here's our requirements document. And we've got our document saved as AI agent requirements document. Make sure you've got this saved and ready to go because we're going to use this for some upcoming work we need to do again with the AI tools. But overall, how fast was this? If you look back 2, 3, 4 years, this document would have taken someone hours to prep, not to mention having to do research if needed. And the AI tool was able to do all of that for us. You watched it live. All of that happened in about 45 seconds. And honestly, very little I would change. It nailed it out of the gate. And that's a wrap for Module 3. If Module 1 explained how the AI brain works, and Module 2 helped you choose the right work, this is where you tell AI exactly how to do the job. This is the difference between why did the AI mess this up and holy crap, it nailed it. Next up in Module 4, we build the agent for real.